down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GBNews,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's Monday the 1st of August and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and I'm joined by Alex Phillips today.
We are on your TV, radio and online until midday, dissecting the day's biggest stories with expert guests and giving our frank opinion. And also reading out lots of your views as well.
Yes, and you can send in those views at gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's the usual email and we'll be getting to those throughout the show. But first, an update on the latest headlines with Rosie.
A very good morning. It's 10 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, the Queen has hailed the Lionesses' historic Euro 2022 win as an inspiration for girls and women across the nation. It's England's first major championship win since 1966 and that infamous World Cup. Well, England yesterday beat Germany 2-1 in extra time in front of a record crowd of over 87,000 fans at Wembley Stadium. Former Lioness Leanne Sanderson spoke to GB News after the historic victory.
9 million people watched the tournament during, the semi-final. 9 million. So when people say, people don't care, people don't want to know, they do know. I think maybe over 14 million tonight watched, from what I heard. Prince William was here, hugging people in a way that I've never seen him hug people before. So it's brilliant.
Well, last night I was in the Trafalgar Square fan zone for GB News and chatted to the England fans who were celebrating the historic win.
I'm so proud of the girls. I'm so proud of all of the people that go unnoticed in women's football. It's on the up. We're going to do well. This is it. This is the turning point, and we beat the men, so come on.
I think it's amazing. I think this is like a pivotal point in time for women's football, women in sport. It's amazing. Great weekend.
Football is home. We're in Trafalgar Square. We've won the Euros. Nothing can be better.
The women did it.
Yeah, but we shouldn't say women or men. It's England. There we go. That's all it is. It's football is home. That's it.
Ukraine's infrastructure minister says a ship carrying grain has left the port of Odessa. It's the first vessel to depart as part of a deal to unblock Ukraine's Black Sea ports. The sailing was made possible after Turkey and the United Nations came to a grain and fertiliser export agreement between Russia and Ukraine last month. Ballots for Conservative Party members to vote in the leadership contest will start arriving today. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will go head-to-head tonight in a hustings in Exeter as they head into a crucial week in the Tory leadership race. Both candidates have made further policy announcements in a bid to shore up support. Liz Truss has vowed to remove EU regulations and red tape in an effort to improve the nation's food security. The Foreign Secretary also promised to tackle staff shortages in farming, partly caused by post-Brexit restrictions, with a short-term expansion to the seasonal workers scheme. Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Therese Coffey, is backing Liz Truss.
Well, I think it shows that colleagues recognise that Liz is ready to lead, is trusted to deliver and will get on with the job from day one. She's been consistent in her approach on reducing taxes for families and for businesses, and I think it's important that we get on with that, including the other policies she's announced today.
Well, Rishi Sunak has committed to taking 4p off income tax within 7 years if he becomes Prime Minister. The former Chancellor said cutting the basic rate from 20p in the pound to 16 would amount to a 20% tax reduction. He says that would be the largest cut to income tax in 30 years. A virtual Court of Appeal hearing is going to take place at 11 o'clock today to hear the life support treatment case of Archie Battersbee. The government referred the case back to the courts for urgent consideration following an intervention by the UN. 12-year-old Archie's in a coma after suffering brain damage. Barts Health NHS Trust said his treatment will end at 2 p.m. this afternoon after a High Court ruled it was in his best interests. Lincolnshire police have charged a 22-year-old man with the murder of the 9-year-old Lilia Valjutite. She was found stabbed on a street in Boston on Thursday. Lithuanian national David Askebas was arrested yesterday after information from the public. He'll appear at Lincoln Magistrates Court later today. Thousands of BT and Openreach workers will strike for a second day today after a 24 walkout on Friday. Members of the Communication Workers Union, including call centre workers and engineers, are disputing a £1,500 pay increase. They say it means a real-term wage cut because of the soaring rate of inflation. The UK has been revealed as one of the worst countries in Europe for taking action to ease the burden of high fuel prices. New research by the RAC shows only Luxembourg has done less than the UK out of 13 European nations that have cut petrol taxes since prices began to soar. In March, the government implemented a 5p per litre reduction, compared to Germany, who cut it by 25p. Waitrose is going to follow Marks & Spencer and Tesco by removing best before dates on nearly 500 fresh food products. It's in an effort to reduce food waste. From September, they're going to scrap dates on packaged fruit and vegetables to encourage shoppers to decide themselves when food's gone off. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News. It's great to have you with us today. Here's what's on today's show.
It has finally come home. The Lionesses made history when they defeated 8-time champions Germany with a 2-1 win in the Women's Euro final last night. We'll be getting all the reaction the morning after and looking at fresh pledges to better fund women's football.
And Tory leadership hopeful Rishi Sunak has pledged to slash the basic rate of income tax from 20p to 16p in the pound if he becomes Prime Minister, just a couple of weeks after he criticised his rival Liz Truss for her tax cut plans. This comes as Conservative Party members start receiving their ballots. We'll be discussing all this very shortly.
And life support is due to be stopped for 12-year-old Archie Battersbee at 2 o'clock today after judges ruled last week that doctors could lawfully disconnect his ventilator. But a last-minute Court of Appeal hearing will be held at 11 o'clock. We'll be there to give you all the updates in this tragic story.
Yes, well, that's all coming up on today's programme and much more as well across the 2 hours we're here with you. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email if you want to get your views in. We'll try and get to as many as we can. But first, Alex gives her opinion on the Lionesses bringing football home.
A lot has been made of the fact it took the women to finally bring football home, reopening all the usual fetishisation of how remarkable it is that healthy human beings with 2 legs are able to excel at a sport that involves kicking. It will be an inspiration, we keep hearing. But there are a few points that haven't been made, and I'm going to go there. First, forget 56 years of hurt. Try it once a month. It actually is quite a feat to drag yourself off the sofa at certain times. And yet, No screaming ab-dabs when those girls got fouled, despite some pretty gnarly tackles. The big girls' blouses we usually see wearing Alice bands and rolling around on the floor, grabbing various body parts as if they've been blown into various fragments by a cluster bomb, could learn a thing or two from the Lionesses. Second, thank the Lord for sports bras. Not push-up bras, not itsy-bitsy specially designed little tennis dresses, and the sort of X-rated, buttock-padded mesh outfits women are encouraged to wear at the gym so they can pout and squat for Instagram as if Derek from accounts on the treadmill behind is David Bailey, the fashion photographer. Third, hurrah for the resurrection of the tomboy. I remember the 90s when ladettes wore cargo pants and girl power was invented, instead of the cult of Kardashian, where women have to literally be made on an operating table to look like a blow-up doll. But the problem with being a tomboy today is you'll probably be told you were born in the wrong body. So how long until Kevin from League 3 renames himself Kira and asks to be in the Lionesses? I'll tell you how long. When the women get paid the same as the men. If you want to see a gender pay gap, football is horrific. Most players in the Women's League get around 30 grand a year. Ronaldo earns that in a day. And for winning the Euros, they each get £55,000. Their male equivalents, however, £1 million each. So while it really isn't that phenomenal that a bipedal sapien in good nick can kick a ball, what really is remarkable is not how far we've come when it comes to girl power, but how far we've otherwise regressed.
Well, I couldn't resist. Had to put this on. What other channel would have their presenters putting this on? I suspect not many. I completely agree with you in some respects in terms of, obviously, women's football not getting, women who play football at the higher leagues, not getting the recognition they deserve and the pay. But what I would say, and we have Aidan McGee on in a second who can clarify this for us, is surely because it's a marketplace and there's supply and demand, isn't it our fault, really, that women aren't get paid as much and they don't have as many audiences? If we wanted to go to women's football matches, we could, nothing's stopping us necessarily. Although, of course, some clubs have sort of fought women's football becoming as big as men's football. But I just think we have the power, the people, the audience, you know, the people who support football clubs have the power to make sure women are paid as much, female footballers. And if we're not turning up to clubs and supporting them, turning up to matches, maybe it's our fault.
It's funny, we were discussing earlier, weren't we, the whole tomboy thing. You're a bit of my inspiration on that. You know, you tweeted last night that, you know, hurrah for tomboys being back.
I tweeted, make being a tomboy cool again, because it is seen as a bit, you know, that controversial word chavvy for women to be football fans or be seen to be tomboys. It's not as cool as it was. And actually, when I saw those women yesterday, it made me proud to see women being celebrated for just being skillful at something, not necessarily for the way they look. And I just thought, good on them. It was a really proud moment.
The kit was just normal as well. Because now when you see the tennis players at Wimbledon, they're dressed up like little tennis Barbies, aren't they? And you just think, you know, crack on and wear sports clothes.
Yes, well, of course, Alex has just referenced, and we cannot believe we're saying this, but it's actually come home. Do I take this off? At what point do I take this off? Well, we won the Women's Euros yesterday for the first time against 8-time winner Germany.
Yes, the Lionesses' victory came after Chloe Kelly scored a second goal for England in the 110th minute in extra time. Talk about last minute, right? The win makes it England's first major trophy since, guess when?
Since I was one.
What, 1966? You were one. You're aging well, love.
Yeah, sorry, 1996. Well, joining us now, you can tell I don't know what I'm talking about. Joining us now is Aidan McGee. He's a sports broadcaster and writer. Look, what we were just saying there about women not being paid as much as men, nowhere nearly as much as the male footballers. Just explain to us a little bit why that is.
Well, at international level, per appearance, the FA announced a couple of years ago that per appearance they actually do get the same. But it's a bit of an empty gesture because the men's team don't actually get paid that much for playing international football. It's regarded as a privilege above and beyond what you do for your domestic clubs. I mean, as Alex referenced, at club level, someone like Cristiano Ronaldo can earn tens of £1 million in a year. And even though most players don't earn that much, it's still very easy to earn £6 million a year playing for a club halfway up the Premier League. So that's the international game. But you're right about the marketplace. It has to be there first. And it's easy to compare the men's game to the women's game. It's inevitable that's going to happen. But they're at completely different developmental stages. The men's game has been professional since the 1950s. They removed the upper salary cap as well. Jimmy Hill did that back in the 60s. So there's been no upper limit on what players can earn. That's why it's skated away far into the distance. And I agree it is a bit too much, but at least it is supply and demand. At least somebody's paying it. And the people who are paying it, i.e. Sky Television through the TV deals, they're getting a return on investment. They made billions of pounds last year. So for all the money that the players are earning, the investors are earning even more. So there has to be a marketplace. There is a TV deal now in place for the WSL, the Women's Super League, which is made up of 12 teams. But broader than that, it needs to be played in schools. Now, we can't go around bullying schools that have played other sports for 400 years, or even more in some cases, to start playing football when they're already excelling at cricket and rugby and everything else, even lacrosse or tennis or something. They've been having great success in providing England internationals in those disciplines. And any sport is good for a child to take part in. It's not all about football. For Ian Wright to say it's a disgrace that schools don't play football. Well, I'm a football fan myself, and I don't think it's a disgrace.
And in fact, Rishi Sunak, the Tory leadership hopeful, of course, he took the opportunity after that win to pledge that if he was Prime Minister, he would ensure schools are better funded or have that option available to play for girls to play football. Do you believe him, or do you think he's actually just bandwagoning a little bit?
Yeah, of course he's bandwagoning. Yeah, he's going for the leadership concept. He's going for the leadership of the party. So, yes, I do think that. But also there's a chicken and egg situation here. It's about demand. I think the demand to play football among girls will increase, but there also has to be provision as well, and there has to be a meeting in the middle. There has to be a provision of Sunday League football. So when I started playing when I was about 8 years old, back in, 1986, I was playing Sunday League football, but I'd been introduced to football by playing at school. So school is a gateway to playing at weekends. You play at school and you think, well, actually, I really like this. I'd like to play on a Saturday and a Sunday as well. And that's when you get more people participating, and that's when you get a bigger pool of people playing the game, and therefore the cream rises to the top and creates a higher quality at the top level, much as it does in any other walk of life. There's a reason why Brazil have a great football team. They have a 100 million population. Latvia aren't as good because their population is only 4.5. They've got a bigger pool to play for. It's obvious. So that's what's got to happen. There's got to be a meeting between provision and demand. And I think it will happen. I think it's going to take a long, long time. We should stop comparing the men's game to the women's game, really. It's easy to draw a comparison with tennis, but if you look at women's tennis, it's been professional for decades upon decades upon decades. Serena Williams has been proving herself in the marketplace commercially, as has Steffi Graf long before her, Martina Navratilova, Chris Evert-Lloyd, and we can go back even further. It's different. It's been professional for a long time. It's at a high level. So we have to do it in a piecemeal way. At the moment, it's a little bit top-down, as I've said before. There's a little bit of too much investment going at the top without the players coming at the bottom. There has to be someone or something, preferably a lot of people, filling that void. That takes 10, 15, even 20 years. It took America 40 years.
I mean, I don't watch football ever. I did watch it last night while I'm making some flat pack French. I had a curry on the stove as well. I felt like a right lad. but I don't understand it, right? But what I saw was all the hallmarks of a great game in terms of the anticipation, the last-minute goal in extra time. Is there a difference when it comes to the way that men play and women play?
I think there is, actually, not just in terms of the way they play the game. Yes, the men's game is faster because we're talking about men against women. But yesterday, the crowd felt very tense going into extra time after Germany had scored. It was like they thought... I don't forget, a lot of the crowd will watch men's football as well, and they'll be thinking, we've seen this before. The England team wasn't getting much from the crowd going into extra time. There was tension. But those girls just would not have it. And they dragged themselves over the line. They conceded the equaliser. Germany looked very strong, and they're a calibre team. Prior to the last tournament, they won 8 of the previous 9 of these. So they're an incredible side, and they'll stay strong as well. But they carried themselves over the line. And they can't say they're relying on experience because they've never done it before. Also, what I say about these girls is that most of them are in their late 20s, mid to late 20s. When they started first investing themselves in terms of time, money, effort, energy and emotion, they were doing this probably 10 years ago, long before it became fashionable. So it's not like they're bandwagon jumpers like Rishi Sunak. They're people who've been investing in it a long, long time, and they will continue to be so. And these are the first ones who've come through and achieved something at the elite level. Yes, they got to the final of the Euro and lost 6-2 against Germany in 2006. They were barely semi-pro then, Alex. You know, they were hoping the dog wasn't going to run away with the ball because they were training on a park. So it's come a long way in a short period of time, but we have to have participation. It can't just be middle-class people waving flags for one day. It has to be sustained over a period of time. And if the interest is there and the demand is there, the marketplace takes care of itself.
Aidan, thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Great comments.
Do you know what I want to see, talking of commercial sort of viability, is I'd like to see all these big magazines who, for a long time, they've been talking about body positivity and they put all sorts of women on their covers to sort of celebrate inclusivity. I want to see them embracing tomboys. I want to see them embracing women who have actually achieved something off their own back. I want to see these girls, these women, on the cover of Vogue or something, you know?
I've got a cover Vogue, but with muddy knees and ponytails. Don't want any of this
exactly.
all that nonsense.
Well, get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But after the break, Rishi Sunak pledges radical tax cuts to get in the driving seat for number 10. Liz Truss has outlined 30 billion of tax cuts too, but would inflation go up even higher? That's the question we'll be asking after the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry and sunny for most, but rain arriving in the west later. Let's take a look at the details. So it will be a dry and bright start across the southwest of England with some early sunny spells, but cloud may linger over higher ground and soon feeling warm in the sunshine. London and the southeast will have a rather cloudy start to the day on Monday, with the odd shower likely, possibly heavy in places. It's a dry and mostly sunny start across South Wales with a little more cloud towards the west, quickly feeling warm in the sunshine. Monday morning will start dry and sunny across the Midlands with almost clear blue skies for all areas. And after a mild night, temperatures will soon rise through the morning in the August sunshine. There'll be a mix of sunny spells and broken cloud across northeast England. An isolated, mostly light shower is possible, but most places will remain dry, feeling pleasantly warm in the sunshine. Then it will be a dry start across Scotland with plenty of sunny spells from the start, the odd shower possible in the east, but most places will stay dry. And Northern Ireland will start Monday dry and sunny, soon feeling warm in the sunshine, but cloud will slowly build from the west through the morning before rain arrives in the afternoon. Staying dry with sunny spells in the south and east, but rain arriving in the north and west. And that's how your weather's shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's 10:22 and this is To The Point with Alex Phillips and myself, Mercy Moroki, on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
It is crunch time for Tory leadership hopefuls Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak as postal ballots begin to drop on members' doorsteps.
Yes, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has gained further momentum with the endorsement of Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi and leadership candidate Tom Tugendhat. She's promised school reforms and to cut red tape around farming to help shore up food security.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has promised NHS reform if elected and the biggest income tax cut since Margaret Thatcher's government.
Yes, well, joining us now is Adam Hawksby, Deputy Director and Head of Levelling Up at Onward, which is a centre-right think tank. Thanks for coming on. I just wanted to talk about Rishi Sunak's pledged tax cut. He says he's going to cut the basic rate of tax from 20% to, I believe, 16%. He's been criticising Liz Truss, hasn't he, throughout the campaign for her tax cut pledges. Is this, you know, a bit of a U-turn for him, and has he actually costed it?
So it's unsurprising that Rishi Sunak has chosen to do this. As you said in the intro, the momentum seems to have been moving away from him over the weekend with those big endorsements from Tom Tugendhat and Nadhim Zahawi. The question, as you say, is whether this position is consistent with his approach to both the campaign and his time as Chancellor. Now, he did announce cutting income tax, the basic rate of income tax, from 20p to 19p as part of the slightly controversial spring statement earlier this year. So he has always aimed for those income tax cuts as opposed to corporation tax or green levies, as Liz Truss has been put forward. But it's difficult to see this as anything but a departure from a stance which to date has been mainly based on fiscal responsibility and balancing the books. So it seems clear this is a pretty radical attempt to try and shift the narrative and the momentum in the leadership race so far.
His plans to charge people for missed doctor's appointments, I mean, is that going to target those with less money rather than those who can afford, say, private medical care?
I think the real challenge with that policy is just the practicalities of delivering it. So it's going to be a huge administrative burden for the NHS to start collecting a whole bunch of fines. The last thing you want the GP receptionists to be doing, in addition to their current duties, is ringing people up asking for a tenner. And ultimately, a lot of the international evidence shows that when you put a cost on some of these things, you increase the rate at which people miss appointments because they've got a fixed number on what it would cost to meet that appointment instead of another one. Really, the focus needs to be on some of the things that were really front and centre in the 2019 election, on new NHS facilities, on more medical staff in the NHS, particularly replacing some of those that we've lost post-Brexit. And all of that requires investment and a real focus on delivery, which is why the fact this debate has focused today on tax cuts instead of investing in public services, it is so unusual because it doesn't seem to be where the public and the electorate are.
When it comes to levelling up, it's pretty good news that Liz Truss wants to make things a bit easier for renters to get on the housing ladder.
Absolutely, and we should be doing everything we can to get more people onto the property ladder and owning their own homes. But the key way you do that is by building more homes. It's not the only way you do it. You do need to do things around how people buy homes through mortgages. But home building is absolutely crucial. And both candidates today have been really guilty of playing to a sort of NIMBY, not in my backyard type narrative by saying that they won't build on the green belt, that they'll move away from housing targets because they know that plays well to the Tory base. But ultimately, we need to build more homes, and that's the only way we're going to get more people onto the housing ladder, young or old.
Do you think at this point there's a smoking gun that Rishi Sunak could use? Because it does seem, as you say, that momentum for his campaign has waned. It looks like Liz Truss is ahead of him. He does keep kind of drip-feeding these policies, which don't seem to quite cut through. At this point, is it Liz Truss's to lose?
It does seem like the momentum is with Liz Truss as the Foreign Secretary. And there was some polls over the weekend that showed that actually it was closer than you might think among Conservative councillors. I think it was 31% to Liz Truss, 29% to Rishi Sunak. So this race is not over, but the momentum is with Liz Truss. But really importantly, because of the way they've designed the voting system, although ballots are dropping today, party members have right until the last minute in order to change their vote. And we've seen that these races can be very volatile. So for both candidates, they'll need to keep their eye on the ball and match some of those eye-catching policies with a real focus on their own character, credibility, and ability to deliver, because that's going to be the most important thing in the next year and a half or 2 years before an election, what candidates can get done, not just what they can promise.
And when it comes to ability to deliver, a lot depends on the cabinet that someone builds around them as well. And call me a cynic, but it seems to me that some people have come out of the woodwork in support of Liz Truss, perhaps having licked their finger, stuck it up in the air, realised that she's going to win and are hoping they might be able to get a job.
We saw the same thing in the race for the last Conservative leadership race when Boris Johnson won, that at this point, people felt the momentum going one way and they put their names forward. I think when it comes to what the cabinet's going to look like, yes, people will want to reward loyalists or people that have come out and made endorsements. But both candidates have recognised that in the previous cabinet, there was sometimes more of a focus on loyalty and less of a focus on talent. And there are some fantastic MPs on the Conservative backbenches that we would want to see, and the country should want to see, serving on the front bench in ministerial or cabinet positions. So whilst there'll be a lot of energy right now around who's endorsing who, the real question is going to be who's going to get stuff done in the next cabinet, and that should lead who gets appointed to senior positions.
And just very finally, you're deputy head and head of levelling up of this think tank, and you focus a lot on sort of poverty and deprivation as well. You're, of course, a centre-right think tank. Who do you think will be a better Prime Minister when it comes to things like levelling up, when it comes to things like poverty and helping the poorest people in society? Because I'm not sure Rishi Sunak and his persona has cut through with people on those lower social and economic brackets.
So both candidates have, to be fair to them, talked a good game on levelling up. So in the debates recently committed to their own versions of the levelling up agenda. Rishi Sunak getting endorsements from Ben Houchen up in Teesside, Liz Truss talking about investment zones, kind of full-fat free ports. But all of our research has shown, a report we did called Turnaround, shows that locally devolved funding at the neighbourhood level that's flexible over the long term is how you tackle deprivation that has multiple causes and comes about in lots of different ways. And so how you get power down to local areas, how you give back control to really follow through on that Brexit vote has to be a focus of levelling up. Great news today that there's going to be a new mayor in York and North Yorkshire. That's the sort of progress we need to see. But that localism, that local voice, is something that's been absent from both candidates so far, and we're really keen to hear a bit more of it.
Adam, thank you ever so much for coming on and sharing your insights into the ongoing leadership race. I feel like it's never going to end. Adam Hawksby, Deputy Director and Head of Levelling Up at Onward, a centre-right think tank.
Well, if you think about it, we're in August now, so it is next. We can officially say it's next month, can't we? Until it finally ends on that 5th of September day, which is when we're set to know. So not too long to wait now.
No, not too long. And I thank heavens for it, because we're very light on news at the moment, aren't we? Not much going on in the press.
Yeah, thank God for this football. Thank God for this win.
For leadership and football, right?
That's after the break. A new report says it's found a way to save £9 billion in public spending. Well, they might want to send that over to Rishi and Liz, I think. Stay tuned to find out how. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
It's 10:31. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. The Queen has hailed the Lionesses' historic Euro win as an inspiration for girls and women across the nation. It's England's first major championship win since the 1966 World Cup. Well, England beat Germany 2-1 in extra time in front of a record crowd of over 87,000 fans at Wembley Stadium. Ukraine's infrastructure minister says a ship carrying grain has left the port of Odessa. It's the first to do so as part of a deal to unblock Ukraine's Black Sea ports. The sailing was made possible after Turkey and the United Nations came to a grain and fertiliser export agreement between Russia and Ukraine last month. Both leadership candidates have made further policy announcements in a bid to shore up support. Liz Truss has vowed to remove EU regulations and red tape in an effort to improve the nation's food security. The Foreign Secretary has also promised to tackle staff shortages in farming with a short-term expansion to the seasonal workers scheme. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak's committed to taking 4 pence off income tax within 7 years if he becomes Prime Minister. The former Chancellor said cutting the basic rate from 20 pence in the pound to 16 would amount to a 20% tax reduction. He said that would be the largest cut to income tax in 30 years. A virtual Court of Appeal hearing is going to take place shortly to hear the life support treatment case of Archie Battersbee. The government referred the case back to the courts for urgent consideration following an intervention by the UN. 12-year-old Archie is in a coma after suffering brain damage. Barts Health NHS Trust said his treatment will end at 2 p.m. this afternoon after a High Court ruled it wasn't in his best interests. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.224 to the dollar and 1.193 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,442.67 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's 10:36 and this is To The Point with Alex Phillips and myself, Mausi Mariki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
The Court of Appeal will hold an urgent hearing at 11 a.m. today following interventions from the government and the UN in the case of Archie Battersbee.
Yes, well, the 12-year-old has been in a coma since April and doctors and High Court judges have said that it's in Archie's best interest for his life support to be ended.
The Barts Health NHS Trust in London, which is caring for Archie, had written to Archie's family saying that treatment would be stopped at 2 o'clock today. But now a legal order preventing that has been put in place until 1 o'clock.
Yes, well, our London reporter, Alice Porter, is outside the Royal Court of Justice. Alice, this is an extraordinary last-minute development, which I'm sure will be much welcomed by Archie's family. Just explain to us how this came about.
Absolutely. I mean, this is completely uncharted territory. I mean, we've had 2 High Court judges which have so far all ruled in favour of the hospital that Archie's life support treatment should be switched off. And an application to the Court of Appeal was rejected, with judges saying that it was lawful for doctors to remove his ventilator. The Supreme Court refused to intervene. And so the parents of Archie Battersbee very much did this sort of last-ditch attempt to the United Nations, to the Committee for People with Disabilities on Friday. They in turn have put out this injunction saying that the life support machine should not be switched off at 2 p.m. until the committee had time to look over this. Whilst this was all going on, Holly Danson, the mother of Archie Battersbee, wrote to the Health Secretary urging him to look at this case in light of the injunction from the United Nations. Now, it's important to stress that just because the United Nations have made this injunction, it doesn't mean it's necessarily legally binding, but we do share conventions with the United Nations when it comes to people with disabilities, and clearly the government have taken this quite seriously, taken this on board. This all over the last night and the last sort of few hours, this really has all happened, and it's highly unusual for the government to intervene in this way, and this is why it's now come to the Court of Appeal for some sort of decision to be made from 11 o'clock today. So really it is all very much down to the wire, because as you were saying there, it's at 2 o'clock this afternoon when the life support machine for Archie Battersbee is expected to be switched off.
Have we actually heard anything from the family yet today, Alice?
Yes, the mother of Archie Battersbee, Holly Danson, has been speaking outside the hospital this morning. I mean, she has not left his side ever since he went into hospital back in April after the accident. She's not gone home at all to her home. She has been by his side. And the impression I've got when I've spoken to her is she is absolutely exhausted from this legal process. And the family received a letter last week from the hospital outlining what would be taking place today at 2 o'clock, and it's exactly what the family didn't want to happen. They have always very much sort of said that they want their son to die in a way, and I quote them, that they say that is natural, i.e. they do not want the ventilator to be sort of mechanically switched off. That's something that they don't want. They say it's not God's wishes, that's not something they want at all. And so to have had this letter come through outlining how the medications would be withdrawn, how the treatment would be stopping at 2 o'clock this afternoon was very much not what the family wanted at all.
Well, Alice, thank you for bringing us that update. We will, of course, be back with you later on when that decision finally does come through. Thank you for that, Alice. And now, moving on, is it right to expect struggling taxpayers to contribute to more and more of their salary to fund government spending commitments? That's the question.
Inflation is skyrocketing, and a key priority for the next Prime Minister will likely be to get a grip of public spending and looking for any cuts in government that can be made.
Yes, well, one think tank claims that reforms to bargaining in the public sector could save up to £9 billion in spending per year. £9 billion of taxpayers' money, of course.
The Taxpayers Alliance claims that a localised rather than a nationwide pay system would mean that rises would no longer be uniform across large sections of the public sector, saving taxpayers money.
Yes, well, joining us now is Darwin Friend, who's a policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you for joining us. So I've got your report here in front of me, but can you just summarise for those watching and listening just what you found in this report and where these savings that you speak of could be found?
Yes, well, thank you firstly for having me on the show. And what we've found is that there's currently public sector pay is largely determined at a national basis. So many of your viewers will be aware that there are these things called pay review bodies, which deals with the pay for public sector workers such as nurses, teachers and the police. And then there are also these single status agreements, for example, for council staff, which largely follow government policy. And the issue is that what these things do is they mean that pay for public sector workers across the entire country is decided centrally, not taking any account of the cost of living in the particular area they may be working and living in. And so what we're recommending is to change that, focusing on a more local basis of pay bargaining for public sector workers, so that then the cost of living in those local areas are taken account in the amount of pay that public sector workers receive.
It's an interesting point you make, but as a think tank, you write these sort of policy suggestions to try and give them to the government, and the government picks it up and says, well, yeah, that's a good idea, we're going to run with this. But surely this smacks in the face of levelling up, saying that, well, if you're from a poor part of the country, you should be paid less.
Well, actually, what we found in the paper, Alex, is the fact that, for example, in lower cost regions, the fact that public sector pay is so high is actually stopping even higher employment because, for example, the private sector is crowded out because they simply can't compete with the level of wages that the public sector is paying. And so what we're actually saying is if they were more reflective of the cost of living in those areas, what it'd actually do is boost employment and prosperity in those regions because it's going to mean more investment by businesses boosting the private sector rather than being dominated by the public sector as they currently are.
Not a risk that you would potentially precipitate some sort of flight. Say if you're a nurse and you're earning X amount of money in the northeast and you could earn a little bit more if you were to move to the southwest, for example. Do you not think that a nurse who doesn't have, responsibilities or attachments to that region might think, well, I'm going to go down south, I get more money there?
Well, that's potentially the issue, but that's not what we're seeing at the moment. What we're seeing actually in the South is the fact that they're having to spend billions of pounds on expensive agency staff because they can't recruit people. And that's the issue that we're facing at the minute. I think in the NHS hospitals alone, it was £2.4 billion a year they spent on agency staff in the recent 3 years. And so what this would actually do is mean that pay is then reflective. So then, yes, it may be higher in higher cost regions, and that may then mean that the amount of reliance on agency staff is reduced. But I think what we need to remember about this overall isn't the fact that it's about cutting public sector pay, it's about making it fairer for private sector workers as well, who are ultimately going to be paying for all of this through the record high tax burden. And so I think if pay was decided on a more local basis, it's a fairer system then. It's going to even out the disparity, which is currently around about 20 billion between the public and private sector workers, and it makes it more affordable for taxpayers, saving them £9 billion almost.
I wonder if what we're seeing at the moment, we're seeing lots of unhappy public sector workers, we're seeing those who can strike. Of course, there are sectors which can't legally strike. But would changes like this, sort of this drive to save taxpayer money by sort of moving down the rate of wage increases, wouldn't we see more dissatisfaction in public services? And essentially, it could risk public services becoming worse than they already are.
Well, I think what we're actually seeing at the moment in public sector pay is the median public sector wage is 14% higher than the private sector. And I think what we should be talking about right now is rather than higher public pay and going on strike if not, I think we need to be talking about tax cuts. We've got a 70-year high tax burden. And if we want to deliver higher pay for people working in this country, the easiest way to do that right now is to cut taxes for hardworking people, leaving them with more of their own money in their pockets right now.
Like that, right now, I assume when it comes to the two leadership candidates who seem to be arguing not so much on cutting taxes, Rishi Sunak now going to town on cutting taxes, but about when to do it. Do you agree with Liz Truss that it needs to be immediate, or Rishi Sunak's school of thought, which is, yes, it needs to happen, but if we did it right now, it'd make matters even worse?
Well, we're not taking any particular view on any candidate in this leadership election. But what we would say is taxpayers are really struggling right now. I mentioned the record high tax burden. We've got inflation at its highest level since the 1990s. And so I do think taxpayers need support right now, with bills going up for energy, fuel, and also them just not being able to keep more of their own money because of the tax burden. And so what I would say is that the government should be going for growth right now. And the way they could do that, for example, is bringing forward and doubling the income tax cut that they've announced. They could also abolish the NI increase that's happened and also cut VAT to 17.5%. And what that's going to do is not only leave more money in people's pockets, as I mentioned earlier, but it's also going to boost growth and investment in this country, all of which we desperately need right now.
And just very finally, I'm really interested in a table you've got here in the report. It's the largest pay rises offered by government departments. This is from 2019 to 2020. And I'm looking at a figure that surely cannot be right. It says here that in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, for example, the highest percentage pay rise was 68.5%, which is a cash value of 22 grand. Can you just explain that to us?
Yeah, so what it is that the average pay increase in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs was around about 2.5%. But what they can also do is give one-offs, for example, to certain civil servants. And so that's a 68.5% rise, as you mentioned, £22,000 of taxpayers' money going to one person when we're going through a cost of living crisis right now. I think it is, quite frankly, outrageous. And I think that's not the only example we had in the paper. There were others who received more than £10,000 as a pay increase in a single year alone. And so I think that just really points out the fact why we need to take a more localised, regionalised basis for pay, so that then these extravagant pay increases can't be given to public sector workers when private sector workers are having to fork out for it and not receiving those pay rises themselves.
Wow, that is quite extraordinary. There's also the DCMS, Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Somebody got a 20 grand pay increase on the taxpayers, so they must have been very happy as well. But Darwin, thank you so much for joining us and walking us through all of that. Darwin Friend there, who's a policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance.
Now, swimmer Adam Peaty suffered his first defeat in 8 years in the 100-metre breaststroke final last night after breezing through to the semi-final. England still took home gold on the back of teammate James Wilby as Peaty finished fourth.
Yes, well, the Commonwealth Games continue today with 28 gold medals up for grabs on day 4. And our Midlands reporter Will Hollis is in Birmingham covering it for us. Good morning, Will. What has been the takeaway so far from these games?
Good morning. Yeah, well, the takeaway right now is certainly the atmosphere from where we are inside of Victoria Square. I've been talking about it as this nucleus of what's been going on at the Commonwealth Games. There isn't any sports here, but a lot of people celebrating and a lot of people dancing. You can just see actually to my right-hand side where just over on the right-hand side, you can see Perry the Bull. He's essentially the Commonwealth Games mascot, this bull that you've seen so much around Birmingham. You can only imagine how warm that poor person inside of that bull mascot must feel, because where I'm standing right now, even though I'm simply wearing a grey blazer, it's absolutely boiling. It's been very overcast over the last few days, but the weather has finally come to the Commonwealth Games. Best place for you to be, probably inside of a swimming pool right now. Last night, Adam Peaty, it wasn't the result that most people were expecting. Of course, they were expecting a gold for Adam Peaty because he's been unbeaten in the 100-metre breaststroke for the last 8 years. Commonwealth Games, as well as Rio de Janeiro, got a gold, 2 golds at Tokyo. So people were quite surprised when he placed 4th in that breaststroke competition. Any consolation? The consolation is, of course, James Wilby got the gold. He's another England swimmer, followed by 2 Australians for the silver and the bronze. So not what people were hoping for, not what people were expecting from Adam Peaty, who lives only about an hour away from here in Uttoxeter. Of course, there is another opportunity for Adam Peaty, because right now, if my timing is correct, he's probably swimming for the 50-metre breaststroke final as well. So it's quieting down a little bit here. The music has stopped in this dance competition. Other things to look out for this afternoon, the gymnastics is going to be a really good opportunity for England to get another gold, because Courtney Tulloch, he's on the rings and people are expecting a really good result for him because he's often winning medals. There's also cycling and lots of other things happening around the city. There's 7 neighbourhood fan zones across the West Midlands just like this. So the party is definitely here, but I'm sure it's across the rest of the West Midlands as well.
Thank you, Will. And I'd recommend taking that blazer off because it does look like you will boil. I'm looking at the people behind you and they're all in T-shirts and shorts. You're not wearing... Are you wearing shorts? Because a blazer and shorts might be an odd combo, but you never know.
No, I'm wearing green trousers, actually. Check out these green trousers, Mercy.
Yeah, I saw those bad boys, actually, on the... Yeah.
You're giving me country vibes right now.
Grey and green should never be seen. That's not the phrase, but, you know. I think you look great, Will. Ignore me. You look dashing, as always.
Yes, well, Will Hollis there, our Midlands reporter in Birmingham covering the Commonwealth Games. I got quite into it over the weekend, actually.
Oh, I love it. Do you know what I really like about things like the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games? I've got a really short attention span, so I kind of like it's like bitty bits of stuff, and I become the expert in everything. I get really into it. Like, the Olympics, judo, know all about that.
Yeah, it is good, it is good. Let's go to some of your views. Where should we start? Let's see, we've discussed football earlier, of course. We had that Euro 2022 women's win. Ruth says, we simply can't describe this as a win for women. An inspiration, sure, but are German women somehow oppressed now they've lost? It's a win for England. Real empowerment is having the chance to compete and give you all. It's got nothing to do with winning. Lots of points there. I think it is a win for English women. Surely we can say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And it's a win for England. Yeah.
It is. And, you know, it's always nice, isn't it, to get these little boosts as a nation. You know,
I have to say, I did see some of the women in the German team kind of sobbing yesterday because it must have been traumatic for them. They've won 8 times. They probably thought they had a good chance of winning, a very strong chance, and they didn't. But I couldn't sympathise with them too much. Sorry,
when you think of all that pressure, the adrenaline, the sellout crowds at 90-odd thousand there, the biggest attendance yet, and you know it's a huge amount for anyone, male or female, to get.
Yeah. Also, you've won it 8 times. Give somebody else a chance, for goodness sakes. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I can't say I'm too sympathetic towards the Germans losing.
No, I'm not. Pauline says, as a hard-working member of the Tory party, I will be voting for Liz, and if Rishi gets in, I and my family will resign from the party. We do not vote for disloyal MPs.
It's interesting. The disloyalty thing comes up again and again and again, doesn't it? Virginia says, I'm worried about all the promises being given by both contestants. Where does this fit in with the manifesto we voted for? Tax cuts at the end of Parliament by Sunak were already going to happen, and he said so when still Chancellor. That's not new. And Leslie, hopefully not my mum, be a bit weird if she was emailing in, says, ironic now Boris has been ousted, Sunak decides there is enough money for tax cuts. What a devious man he is. Devious.
Well, not much love for Rishi, it seems, in our inbox today, because Victor says, has Rishi taken into consideration the cost of enforcing these fines? By fines, he means the £10 fines Rishi Sunak has pledged he would implement for people missing their NHS appointments. Victor says, surely the best plan is to shame people into contacting their surgery or hospital and letting them know they're not attending. I think it's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. I think it's one of these things where the cost for actually enforcing these £10 fines would just outweigh massively the cost they'd be getting back in terms of the fees they'd be getting back in terms of missed appointments. I think it's a terrible idea.
You know what I always thought could work? And that's we're as a nation, we're one of the biggest givers of charity in the world. Per capita, we lob out charity like nobody's business. I'm pretty sure if every hospital and every doctor's surgery set up a system whereby after your appointment you could go online and voluntarily give a bit of extra money, a load of people would do that. I reckon it would rake in loads for the NHS, and it wouldn't be on a tax-based system. It would be what people wanted to give for appreciation of the service.
Yes, actually, you have those every time I go to the McDonald's drive-through, which is a lot of times. You still have those sort of coin boxes at the front in the drive-through where you can just drop in the extra change, and I'm sure, I mean, I probably have to find the figures, I'm sure even McDonald's gets lots of donations for their charity Ronald McDonald Foundation. So surely people would be willing to give to the NHS.
But, you know, keep the NHS free, keep it, you know, taxpayer funded, but if you want to contribute a little bit more to this fantastic national institution,
but I think it would have to be localised because, you know, when you're already getting taxed enough to fund it, people feel, why should I be putting more into this big pot? But if it's for their local surgery, for example, or local mental health services, then they might be more willing to. Yeah. Well, little reminder before we finish the hour that every Wednesday we hand over our show to you, which means it's full of your ideas and it's just full of what you want us to talk about and what you think the most important stories are.
Yeah, tell us the subjects that we should be covering. I'm back on Wednesday, actually, aren't I? So I'm looking forward to that. I haven't done the Wednesday call-out thing. Tell us what you want answering and who we should be talking to as well. We had loads of emails, so keep them coming in. Email your stories at tothepoint@gbnews.uk.
Yes, now keep all your other thoughts coming in to us on our email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We will be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of those views after this break.
Hello again, Aidan McGivern here with the latest from the Met Office. Dry for many today with some warm sunshine, but there will be rain in the north later and across some central areas as well. At the moment, area of high pressure, elongated, is stretching out towards the UK, but along the top of that high, some weather fronts are coming along. and they'll send rain in from the west later. In fact, the first signs of that rain into the far west of Northern Ireland by the afternoon. And one or two showers couldn't be ruled out for parts of East Anglia and the far southeast, but for many, it will stay dry here, rather cloudy here. Plenty of sunshine in between these areas of weather and feeling warm. 23 to 25 for parts of England and Wales, low 20s for Scotland, 28 for London, and then for Northern Ireland, feeling cooler as a breeze and rain sweeps in by the end of the afternoon. That pushes into Scotland, Northern England, parts of North and West Wales overnight. Some heavy bursts over the hills of Western England, Western Scotland, North West Wales as well. And with that cloud and rain arriving, it's a fairly muggy night. Temperatures staying up in the mid to high teens. But it stays dry in the far south and southeast once again. A lot of cloud to start the day and further bursts of rain moving through these central areas. So a wet start for many. It does brighten up after a gloomy morning for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sun comes through, but it stays grey and overcast for Western England and Wales with some dampness around. The southeast, however, feeling humid, with temperatures reaching 28 to 30 Celsius, whilst it's low to mid-20s elsewhere. Now, any rain tends to peter out through the evening. There'll be further showers coming through for northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well. In between, a lot of cloud covers the map, and that cloud's still with us on Wednesday with some outbreaks of rain, but Thursday and Friday turn drier and brighter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. The time's 11 o'clock and this is To The Point on GB News with myself, Mercy Moroki, and Alex Phillips. We're with you until midday with today's biggest stories, lots of discussion, your opinions and even our frank opinions as well. And don't forget to get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. But first, here's the latest headlines with Rosie.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date with the latest news. The Queen has hailed the Lionesses' historic Euro 2022 win as an inspiration for girls and women across the nation. It's England's first major championship win since the 1966 World Cup. England beat Germany 2-1 in extra time in front of a record crowd of over 87,000 at Wembley Stadium. Former Lioness Leanne Sanderson spoke to GB News after the historic victory.
9 million people watched the tournament during, the semi-final. 9 million. So when people say You know, people don't care. People don't want to know. They do know. I think maybe over 14 million tonight watched, from what I heard. Prince William was here, hugging people in a way that I've never seen him hug people before. So it's brilliant.
Last night I was in the Trafalgar Square fan zone for GB News and was chatting to England fans who were clearly celebrating the historic win.
I'm so proud of the girls. I'm so proud of all of the people that go unnoticed in women's football. It's on the up. We're going to do well. This is it. This is the turning point, and we beat the men, so come on.
I think it's amazing. I think this is like a pivotal point in time for women's football, women in sport. It's amazing. Great weekend.
Football is home. We're in Trafalgar Square. We've won the Euros. Nothing can be better.
The women did it.
Yeah, but we shouldn't say women or men. It's England. There we go. That's all it is. It's football is home. That's it.
Ukraine's infrastructure minister says a ship carrying grain has left the port of Odessa for Lebanon under a safe passage agreement. It's the first vessel to depart as part of a deal to unblock Ukraine's Black Sea ports. The sailing was made possible after Turkey and the United Nations came to a grain and fertiliser export agreement between Russia and Ukraine last month. Ukraine's foreign minister called it a day of relief for the world. Ballots for Conservative Party members to vote in the leadership contest will start arriving today. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will go head-to-head tonight in Hustings and Exeter as they head into a crucial week in the Tory leadership race. Both leadership candidates have made further policy announcements in a bid to shore up support. Liz Truss has vowed to remove EU regulations and red tape in an effort to improve the nation's food security. She's also promised to tackle staff shortages in farming with a short-term expansion to the seasonal workers scheme. Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Therese Coffey, is backing Liz Truss.
Well, I think it shows that colleagues recognise that Liz is ready to lead, is trusted to deliver and will get on with the job from day one. She's been consistent in her approach on reducing taxes for families and for businesses, and I think it's important that we get on with that, including the other policies she's announced today.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak's committed to taking 4 pence off income tax within 7 years if he becomes Prime Minister. The former Chancellor said cutting the basic rate from 20 pence in the pound to 16 would amount to a 20% tax reduction. That's the largest cut to income tax in 30 years. A virtual Court of Appeal hearing will take place right now this morning to hear the life support treatment case of Archie Battersbee. The government referred the case back to the courts for urgent consideration following an intervention by the UN. 12-year-old Archie is in a coma after suffering brain damage. Arts Health NHS Trust said his treatment will end at 2 p.m. this afternoon after a High Court ruled it was in his best interests. Lincolnshire police have charged a 22-year-old man with the murder of 9-year-old Lilia Velutier. She was found stabbed on a street in Boston on Thursday. Lithuanian national David Askebas was arrested yesterday after information was provided from the public. He'll appear at Lincoln Magistrates Court later today. The UK is being revealed as one of the worst countries in Europe for taking action to ease the burden of high fuel prices. New research by the RAC shows only Luxembourg has done less than the UK out of 13 European nations that have cut petrol taxes since prices began to soar earlier this year. In March, the government implemented a 5 pence per litre reduction. Compared that to Germany, who cut it by 25 pence. Waitrose is going to follow Marks & Spencer and Tesco by removing best before dates on nearly 500 fresh food products. It's in an effort to reduce food waste. From September, they're going to scrap dates on packaged fruit and vegetables to encourage shoppers to decide themselves when food's gone off. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
A very good morning. It's 11:05 and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Alex Phillips. We're on your TV, radio and online, and here's what's in our final hour.
It has finally come home. The Lionesses defeated 8-time champions Germany with a 2-1 win in the Women's Euro final last night.
Yes, and postal ballots are dropping through Tory members' letterboxes in the Tory leadership election race. Is Liz Truss still the favourite, or can Rishi Sunak turn it around? We'll be giving you expert commentary and analysis.
And the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is reportedly going to pay millions more of taxpayers' money to France to try to stop migrants arriving to the UK by boat. But given their record so far, will this just be money down the drain? We'll be discussing.
That's all coming up and much more as well in the final hour. And get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, as I'm sure you know by now, England won the Women's Euros yesterday for the first time against 8-time winner Germany.
Yes, well, the Lionesses' victory came after Chloe Kelly scored a second goal for England in the 110th minute during extra time. The win makes it England's first major trophy since 1966.
Well, joining us now is Aidan McGee, sports broadcaster and writer. It was some performance, wasn't it? I mean, I was watching it, and I'm not normally a football fan, but it was gripping.
It was gripping. 42 fouls. That's probably about twice what you get in an average match, male or female. Germany came out to do this to England. They wanted to knock them out of their stride. That's generally what you do when you feel that your ability is a little bit lacking. You try and make up the difference by being aggressive. That's what Alex Ferguson used to send his Man United team out to do to Arsenal and Chelsea when he felt they were kind of conceding ground. But England overcame that. I didn't sense the fear that bedraggles the men's team a lot of the time. The penalty almost, if you pardon the pun, or the drawback of failing is so severe these days in the social media era that I detect sometimes that the men's team are a bit fearful. Sam Allardyce certainly said that when he was England manager. He said, we've got to get past this fear, players not wanting to take penalties. England weren't getting much from the crowd going into extra time last night because they thought, well, we've seen this all before with the men's team, but those girls weren't having it. They dragged themselves over the line against the perennial overachievers in this tournament. Prior to the last one, they won 8 of the previous 9. They do well in any sport, Germany, so they're a formidable opposition anyway, but they overcame them, and they're having conceded an equaliser at a really inopportune time, 11 minutes from time. They went into extra time, they got the job done, and we can't say that about all our teams.
Yeah, and as we mentioned there, Germany's won 8 times. I think the previous winners were the Netherlands, am I
Correct.
right?
Yeah, under Serena Wiegmann, the current England coach.
And it's been going on for about 40-odd years, hasn't it? So 8 times in that, they're a substantial team. They're a team to beat, aren't they?
What do you think? Tremendous side. Sorry to interrupt. They had a professional league for 20 years now, so they are ahead. They shouldn't really be losing to England. But having said that, England have come a long way in a short period of time.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask. What happened, basically? Because, Germany will be very, very disappointed, to say the least, and they will be asking, what went wrong? Why couldn't we sort of bring our A game today? What do you think it was?
Well, there was one thing that was pivotal, and that's the fact that Alexandra Popp, who had scored 6 goals in the tournament, probably the best striker in Europe still, overcoming injuries. She'd come into the tournament, she was doing so well, scored twice against France at Milton Keynes Stadium MK on Wednesday. She was injured in the warm-up, so that was a huge blow. But sometimes little bits of luck just play into certain teams or certain individuals' favour. I remember France '98. I wasn't necessarily sure that France deserved to be the favourites in that tournament in the men's section. They had some brilliant players, don't get me wrong. In fact, looking back, they probably did deserve to win it, and they were the best team. But at the time, the clouds seemed to just align. It was that Rainbow Nation team. You had 5 or 6 players in there who weren't even French. They'd been kind of borrowed from other nations, for want of a better expression. And they just won it. Every little bit of luck went their way throughout the tournament, various sendings off at certain points in the games, and everything just came together. And sometimes you just need that little bit of luck. Germany will not look at that game last night and think, what could we have done better? I don't think they did a lot wrong. But there won't be a great deal of soul-searching. They'll always come back strong.
I was interested when you just said that Germany's had a professional female league a lot longer than we have. What's going on there? We invented football.
We did. But there's actually, having a professional league isn't necessarily the catalyst. It helps, but there is precedent for where it didn't quite go to plan.
How long's Germany's and how long's ours been going?
Ours has been going for 2 years.
Yeah,
2001. 2001, Germany started theirs. The US has been going since the early 90s, so they're well ahead of us. Yes.
They don't even play soccer.
They do play soccer.
Wow, that was the worst American accent I've ever heard.
They all come out like some strange hybrid.
Let me tell you about the precedent that I know of in Japan. I was there in 2011. There was the Women's World Cup there at the time. USA were the overwhelming favourites. Japan beat them. Now, Japan's women's sectional, the women's professional league, was going up against... Well, they didn't have the context of a men's league, which had been going for over a century, like it was over here. It isn't the gargantuan proposal that we've got. They were up against the J League over there. It had been going since 1992. So, yes, it should have started something special when they went and beat the USA back in 2011, but it didn't. It went into the following season, and that one-off novelty of getting behind, the nation getting behind a country or their team to win a tournament and pull off a wonderful upset, it didn't translate into the league attendances the following season. We've got to do much, much better in the Women's Super League. We're averaging 1,500 people for matches, and it has to improve.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because our Premier League is probably the most famous football league in the world. You go to the most furthest flung corners of Africa and you've got kids wearing the Premiership tops and all the rest of it. So, I mean, do you think this is really now going to kickstart? I mean, people are talking about grassroots football a lot, aren't they? And, you know, hopefully more girls are going to start playing football at school. But do you think this could start creating a buzz around our Premier League for women and more viewers internationally?
It's not going to be enough on its own, but it's necessary. I'd say necessary but not sufficient. So the provision has to be there. There has to be more support for weekend leagues. You know, when I was playing as a kid, I was introduced through school, but I played at weekends because I wanted to extend my involvement into the weekends. So that has to be there. The school has to be there, and the Sunday league provision has to be there as well. At the top end of the game, money has to be coming in as well. That's happening. But ultimately, you use that key word in the last hour, the marketplace. If people want to engage with women's football, if they want to play, if they want to watch it, the product has to be good.
Yeah.
And there's loads of room for improvement. It can get quicker, and it will get quicker the more countries start playing.
Other than the internationals, can you watch it? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big criticism is that although Chelsea, for example, might be getting 2,000 fans at AFC down in Kingston on a weekend, they're kind of piggybacking the men's team. So a lot of those fans are there, are getting the tickets.
on the box, like on telly?
Yeah, you can, but it's on BT. So it's difficult to watch. And, well, listen, you can watch it if it's available, you can watch it, but it needs to be advertised properly. Now, it is getting better. BT are getting better at advertising it, but the quality has to improve. Lots of different stars have to align. It's no one single thing. There's about 5 or 6 different factors which have to improve and grow to make the whole picture a lot rosier going forward. And that's what's happened with the men's game. We were struggling in the men's game in the end of the 80s. There's a massive image problem. We had violence. We had players who were not living the right lifestyles off the pitch. It had an image problem. Governments didn't want anything to do with it. No, Thatcher wasn't interested in football. She wanted to lock fans behind fences. And some would say she's probably right. With all that violence, what are you meant to do? You can't let them come onto the pitch and attack the players. But the turning point was the investment by Sky back in 1992. What was it? An anthem. They had an anthem when they launched the takeover of the rights. It was a Simple Minds song called "Alive and Kicking."
You're going to sing it for us?
Alive and kicking.
I didn't know you were going to. Do you know what?
I wasn't expecting that.
But the word "alive and kicking" was quite important because it was saying that, listen, the game is still very special. We've had some problems, but we're still there and we're going to go forward. And they did make it good.
Yeah, I think we'll know women's football is big when we see the husbands suing each other for libel, and it's on the front of every single paper. I think I want to see actually, reality shows about what they call Habs. That's what I want to see.
Husbands and
boyfriends. Yeah, I want to see reality shows. Well, I'm trademarking that right now, here.
Before I do.
Yes. So, on a serious note, though, we've spoken a lot about what it means and all the sort of commercial aspects of it. What about what it means for very local football clubs and also young girls, and especially young girls who want to play football professionally, but they perhaps aren't very well off? And what can those groups do?
It's vital, Mercy, that we learn the lessons of London 2012. That turned out to be a jamboree of flag waving, which mainly benefited corporate entities. We have to learn from that. The participation wasn't picked up from it at all. In fact, we were all told back in 2012 that everyone would start picking up tennis rackets and buying blades and racing 100 metres in their back gardens. You know, most kids weren't big enough, their gardens weren't big enough to do that anyway. However, 10 years on, we can learn from that. Yes, it's a long way to go, but participation, it's difficult in schools. You can't just go around and bully schools and say, listen, you've done cricket for 400 years, now we want you to do football. Who makes that decision? You know, everyone can choose whichever sport they want. Looking at the bigger picture, it's great that young people are engaging in sport at any level and whatever discipline. So but it does have to happen. Being right, though, to say it's a disgrace that schools aren't playing football enough for women is not quite right, because they could be doing other sports.
Do you think there's a cultural aspect to it as well? Because yesterday, when me, my mum and my daughter were watching the game, and my mum jokingly said, oh, Rosa, you can, get into football now at school. But then she said, actually, no, I would be terrified. I couldn't watch you if you can, because she's only a dainty little girly girl. Do you think there's a cultural thing as well where parents might, encourage their sons into football, but girls, they're like, oh, I don't want them to break their shins and I don't want them to sort of get barged over
I
by
was
bigger
quite dainty when I was 8 years old, believe it or
Really?
not. But, yeah, exactly, kind of. But I was, but my mum used to worry about me going to tackles. But you just
Really?
grow at different rates and things like that, and you get confident. In fact, coming back from an injury, you could have played 10 years of football, but coming back from an injury, you never know you're back in the game and ready to play until you've taken a tackle. So sometimes you have to take the risk and get out there. It's a bit like diving from a diving board, isn't it? You know, jump off, see what happens.
That's quite a risky strategy.
Yeah, a little bit.
Aidan, thank you. Hopefully when all the promotion is done to get women's football on the television more, you can come back and sing that song and, you know...
Yeah, there are more verses than what I said.
Yeah, we did 2 words, but we loved it. We loved it.
Well,
see
sticking on this, our national reporter Paul Hawkins is in Trafalgar Square, where celebrations of the Lionesses' victory in the Euros are going to kick off later today. Paul, what can we expect later from those celebrations?
Yeah, well, you say they're going to kick off. I think they're sort of kicking off already. In fact, they've been kicking off since that incredible match last night, really, through the night, and then they're carrying on this morning. So at the moment, lots of people descending on Trafalgar Square. In fact, if I just step out a shot at the moment, I don't know if you can make out, it's a sea of flags at the moment here in Trafalgar Square. So many people have come down to celebrate with the England team, who will be appearing later on, led by Captain Leah Williams and also the coach Serena Wiegmann. They'll be appearing on stage, they'll be lifting the trophy, they'll be making speeches, etc. The atmosphere here is fantastic. It's very different from, well, I mean, we've never had a victory parade, have we, for the men's team? Not since 1966 anyway, but certainly in terms of the feeling here with the fans here, it feels less toxic than it does when when you have England men's fans congregating. But it's a fantastic atmosphere at the moment. Everyone's in a really good mood.
Paul, thank you for that. Sorry, we lost you for a second just at the end there. But thank you. We will, of course, be keeping an eye on those celebrations and see what people get up to. It's, of course, a historic win yesterday from the Lionesses. Thank you, Paul Hawkins, there. Now, after the break, postal ballots in the Tory leadership election race are beginning to hit doorsteps today. The doorsteps, of course, of Tory members only. Well, who do you want to be the next resident of 10 Downing Street? Do you have a vote? If you do, let us know who you'll be voting for. But first, here's the weather.
Hello again, Aidan McGivern here with the latest from the Met Office. Dry for many today with some warm sunshine, but there will be rain in the north later and across some central areas as well. At the moment, an area of high pressure, elongated, is stretching out towards the UK, but along the top of that high, some weather fronts are coming along, and they'll send rain in from the west later. In fact, the first signs of that rain into the far west of Northern Ireland by the afternoon. And 1 or 2 showers couldn't be ruled out for parts of East Anglia and the far southeast. But for many, it will stay dry here, rather cloudy here. Plenty of sunshine in between these areas of weather and feeling warm. 23 to 25 for parts of England and Wales, low 20s for Scotland, 28 for London, and then for Northern Ireland, feeling cooler as the breeze and rain sweeps in by the end of the afternoon. That pushes into Scotland, Northern England, parts of North and West Wales overnight. Some heavy bursts over the hills of Western England, Western Scotland, North West Wales as well. And with that cloud and rain arriving, it's a fairly muggy night. Temperatures staying up in the mid to high teens. But it stays dry in the far south and southeast once again. A lot of cloud to start the day and further bursts of rain moving through these central areas. So a wet start for many. It does brighten up after a gloomy morning for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sun comes through, but it stays grey and overcast for Western England and Wales with some dampness around. The southeast, however, feeling humid, with temperatures reaching 28 to 30 Celsius, whilst it's low to mid-20s elsewhere. Now, any rain tends to peter out through the evening. There'll be further showers coming through for northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well. In between, a lot of cloud covers the map, and that cloud's still with us on Wednesday with some outbreaks of rain, but Thursday and Friday turn drier and brighter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
It's 11:23 and it's a shame you weren't tuned in during the advert break because Mercy was entertaining the whole studio with a flag dance. It was quite a spectacle.
Yes, with my. If you didn't see me earlier, I had an England flag, and so I thought I would make a little. I would do interpretive dance to celebrate the win yesterday in the break.
It was beautiful. It really was a sight to behold.
Wow, you are watching GB News live on your TV, radio, and online. But now to our top story.
It's crunch time for Tory leadership hopefuls Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak as postal ballots begin to drop on members' doorsteps.
Yes, well, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has gained further momentum with the endorsement of Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi and leadership candidate Tom Tugendhat. She's promising school reforms and to cut red tape around farming to help shore up food security here in the UK.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has promised NHS reform if elected and the biggest income tax cut since Margaret Thatcher's government.
Yes, well, joining us now is political commentator Stephen Carlton-Woods. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. What do you make of, let's start with Rishi Sunak's new pledge to cut the basic rate of income tax from 20p in the pound to 16p?
Well, I think it's a bit of gesture politics, really. I think he's seen his lead slipping away. He thought he was in the lead for the race for the leadership, and it seems like the members, we'll know in a few weeks' time anyway, but if you look on social media and I get a feeling of what the members are saying in the background, they're very much on the side of Liz Truss. So we've seen Rishi change his mind quite a lot in this throughout the hustings and the different TV debates he's taken part in. So I just think it's probably a bit of an air of desperation to try and entice them last few members to go with him rather than Liz Truss.
But do you buy any of it? I mean, at the end of the day, they still have to stand on the 2019 manifesto. It's like they're bringing out their own personal manifestos. They've got 2 years to get it all done.
Yes, absolutely. We've seen. Don't forget, Rishi's been the Chancellor since the Conservatives got that fantastic 80% majority, and he's the one that's set the budgets in all this time. So for him to now say he's going to do this or do that, I mean, he's been the boss when it comes to the money, and we know that him and Boris has fallen out on a few issues over this because Boris wanted it one way and Rishi got his own way and did it his way. So for him to start saying he'll do things like this now, it's a little bit too late, I think, considering all what's happened.
Well, Stephen Carlton, thank you so much for joining us. Very short there, but we will have you back on another time.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Our political correspondent Tom Harwood also joins us now for some more analysis. Look, I find it quite bizarre how Rishi Sunak seemed to have been criticising Liz Truss for offering tax cuts, and now he's doing the same himself.
Yes, it does seem to be getting a bit scrappy. Of course, the Liz Truss campaign saying that this is a welcome move from the Chancellor, but if only his actions had matched his words when he was in the job. The Liz Truss campaign accusing Rishi Sunak of a U-turn on this issue of tax. And of course, there are some inconsistencies here in terms of saying that Rishi Sunak wouldn't cut tax until inflation's got down, and now he's saying he will cut VAT before inflation's down, and he will cut income tax on this 7-year programme, apparently despite whether or not inflation will be down or not, because we are getting the dates there. Although the conversation has moved in the last hour or so onto this issue of agriculture, of farming. There's the hustings down in the southwest in Exeter this evening, and I have to say in the last few minutes, the Rishi Sunak campaign has put out a pretty stark briefing against Liz Truss when it comes to agricultural issues. Liz Truss has announced that she will have a temporary visa scheme for seasonal workers to come over and pick fruit and the like. Farmers are very concerned that they will not be able to get that done. So this temporary seasonal scheme is what Liz Truss wants to extend while doing a longer-term set of reforms to try and get the sector up to domestic talent, but also technology. And in response, the Rishi campaign has said that Liz Truss's announcement today does nothing for farmers and food. She blames Brexit and fails to see the opportunities from it to help farmers and food production, has no plan to tackle inflation, which has hit input costs hard, and neglects to mention trade deals because of her record in this area. And then, and this is the really stark bit, the true Remainer colours are starting to show. That's Rishi Sunak accusing Liz Truss of showing Remainer colours when it comes to this area, likely because of this temporary visa scheme for seasonal workers to pick fruit and the like on these farms. Now, that is the most extraordinary attack there. It is getting very blue on blue. But probably one of the other extraordinary bits of this is Rishi Sunak's campaign attacking Liz Truss's trade deals. Now, Liz Truss, of course, secured around 70 trade deals as we left the EU, and Rishi Sunak seems to be taking a more protectionist side here, saying that we shouldn't have these imports because it may damage farmers. It's a pretty stark change of direction because, of course, he was in the government that trumpeted these trade deals, and now he seems to be attacking them. In response, I have to say, I spoke to the Liz Truss campaign about this pretty stark briefing, and the Liz Truss campaign, or at least a source on it, simply sent me a video of a car careering on a slippery road, spinning round and round and round. That was their official response.
That's interesting. Do you think it's Rishi Sunak has failed to read the room, especially as we say those ballots are going through letterboxes of Tory party members? Because Tory party members don't like blue on blue. Many of them already think Rishi Sunak has backstabbed the Prime Minister. In fact, Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, was tweeting images of Rishi Sunak backstabbing the Prime Minister. This will look like more vitriol a little bit. This will look like Rishi Sunak being a bit bitter. They won't like that.
I think that that's probably a decent reading of it. It is getting much more tense because, of course, those ballots are landing on the doormats of Conservative Party members from today. People may well be voting from today. And we know that if history is anything to go by, Conservative voters vote early rather than late. So this is the real crucial moment of this campaign. And the implication of what the Liz Truss campaign was saying to me just a few minutes ago is that Rishi Sunak is sort of careering all over the place, throwing everything, trying to make something stick. And that might help him. Then maybe there will be something that make people think, oh, hang on, maybe Liz Truss isn't all that, or maybe she's deficient in this area or the other. But this tactic of trying to throw a lot of mud and hoping some sticks, it might not do that well for Rishi Sunak in the round. It might make him look messy. It might make him look like a U-turner, like a backstabber.
Tom, thank you very much.
Coming up after the break, Priti Patel is planning to announce another multi-million-pound deal with France to stop migrants crossing the channel. Will this work? She's already tried this before. Will it be money down the drain? Well, we'll be speaking to a former chief immigration officer. But first, a look at this morning's headlines.
Good morning, it's 11:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Queen has hailed the Lionesses' historic Euro 2022 win as an inspiration for girls and women across the nation. It's England's first major championship win since the 1966 World Cup. England beat Germany 2-1 in extra time in front of a record crowd of over 87,000 at Wembley Stadium. Ukraine's infrastructure minister says a ship carrying grain has left the port of Odessa. It's the first vessel to do so as part of a deal to unblock Ukraine's Black Sea ports. The sailing was made possible after Turkey and the United Nations came to a grain and fertiliser export agreement between Russia and Ukraine last month. Both leadership candidates have made further policy announcements in a bid to shore up support. Liz Truss has vowed to remove EU regulations and red tape in an effort to improve the nation's food security. She's also promised to tackle staff shortages in farming with a short-term expansion to the seasonal workers scheme. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has committed to taking 4p off income tax within 7 years if he becomes Prime Minister. The former Chancellor said cutting the basic rate from 20p in the pound to 16 would amount to a 20% tax reduction, the largest cut to income tax, he says, in 30 years. A virtual Court of Appeal hearing's taking place to hear the life support treatment case of Archie Battersbee. The government referred the case back to the courts for urgent consideration following an intervention by the UN. 12-year-old Archie is in a coma after suffering brain damage. Barts Health NHS Trust said his treatment will end this afternoon after a High Court ruled that was in his best interests. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.224 to the dollar and 1.193 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,447.57 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory. twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's 36 past 11 and this is To The Point with Alex Phillips and me, Mercy Moriki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Home Secretary Priti Patel is set to announce a multi-million-pound deal with France to attempt to stop more channel crossings.
That's over 16,000 migrants reached the UK this year and about 13,500 were intercepted by the French. On Saturday, 460 migrants crossed in 12 boats, taking the total last month to more than 3,500.
But why are these measures only being done now? And are they instead of the government's flagship Rwanda policy?
Yes, well, joining us now to discuss this is Kevin Saunders, who's former Chief Immigration Officer for the UK Border Force at Calais. Good morning. Always good to see you. What do you make of this proposal that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, will send yet more money to France to try and stop these boat crossings, as if we haven't already sent them tens of millions already?
Well, yes, it's unfortunate that we're having to pay the French to do their job properly, but it's a fact of life. We want the French to patrol the beaches. We want them to stop migrants getting onto the water. And as you said, 13,500 crossings have been stopped this year. So perhaps it's money well spent, although I'd be much happier if the French were doing their job properly and stopping the people in the first place.
Yeah, I don't think lots of people will appreciate just how many the French have stopped. 13,500, we say there, were intercepted by the French. Do you know if this number has actually gone up since we gave the French money? I think it was sort of last year at some point. Or has it remained relatively stable?
No, the French are doing more. The French are doing more and they're getting more results. Unfortunately, there are more and more migrants. So, really, we're like the little boy sticking his finger in the dike. We're stopping at one place and it's coming out at another. So, yes, the French are doing more. They're stopping more, and they're also doing more on the chasing the facilitators. More, I believe there have been 21 joint cases this year of facilitators, and we had that big fine the other week of boats and what have you in Europe, didn't we?
I mean, people often see the lack of much progress when it comes to stopping the migrants as potentially a lack of French will or French resolve. I mean, you must have worked with the French a lot when it comes to immigration and the borders. I mean, is there, do you think, a sort of a lack of French will to stop those boats? Or is it just a case of resourcing? Or, you know, as you were saying, is it a bit like whack-a-mole? You can target this area and this area, but more and more are going to pop up.
I think the French don't have enough people on the ground to stop them. That's the big problem. It's a long coastline, and there aren't enough PAF officers to actually patrol all of it. I understand the French have called out some of their reserves to deal with it as well, but even that, it's just not enough people at all, and they won't deploy the military for some reason. Now, the United Kingdom has offered to put UK people onto the French border, but of course that went down like a lead balloon with the French, who said no. I mean, what we need to do, we need to get the French to come onto the Channel and to actually stop the people once these boats are on the channel. They're quite capable of doing that, but they won't. So what I hope is that when we get a new Prime Minister in the next couple of weeks, one of the top priorities is to have a meeting with Monsieur Macron and try and come to some sensible agreement.
I think that's right, and I'm hoping that that will be on their list of their to-do list at the very top, actually, or near the top at least. I do want to ask you, though, who do you think, given that we are going to have a new Prime Minister in about 5 weeks, who do you think is best placed to put a stop to the number of migrants crossing the channel on these boats? Because it's a problem that will continue unless somebody does something, quite firm.
Well, we need to seriously negotiate with the French. I think the thing is that the French are upset with us over all sorts of things, fishing, Northern Ireland, you name it, they're upset with us over it. So we need to have a new face negotiating with Macron and perhaps do a deal with him over some of the things that the French are unhappy about. But to be fair, it's not just the French. The rest of Europe are not being exactly helpful. We have the European border force, Frontex, who have got masses and masses of phenomenal kit, which they're deploying quite happily in the Mediterranean, but they won't deploy in the Channel. And that as well is very unhelpful.
Yeah, unhelpful indeed. That was Kevin Saunders, former Chief Immigration Officer for the UK Border Force at Calais.
Yes, now we're just going to go to some of your views very quickly, as we promised, just before we head over to the final item, which will be a bit of a royal roundup for you. There's lots been going on with the Royals. But before that, about the women's Euros, Bob says, celebrate the success of the women's team. We should be dropping the sniping at football, the comparisons and the moaning, and just celebrate the success of the women.
Yeah, Megan says the men's game bring in 100 times the amount that women's does at the moment. That's why the money is different. Fix that and the girls will get paid equally.
Yeah, there is that, isn't it? We were speaking to Aidan McGee, who's a sports broadcaster and writer, and he was saying they pull in crowds of 2,000 sometimes. That's compared to tens of thousands for the men's game. So perhaps people just, if they want to see the women footballers get paid more, they need to start turning up to games, start putting their money where their mouth is and actually, support the women by going to clubs, going to games.
Yeah, well, Martin here says the women's final tickets was £7.50 to £50. That's a bargain, isn't it? And the men's final in the same stadium, Wembley, was £245 to £800.
Yes, well, he says that's the reality. This women's final was not a premium event. The men's final was, well, in retrospect, it was a premium event, I guess you can say, because, exactly. I mean, it was an historic win. So perhaps, hopefully, we will see more investment into the women's game and we will see the women being paid what they deserve.
Yeah, well, they certainly deserve to get a bit more than 30 grand a year, I reckon. It's not a bad salary, but considering that male footballers in the Premiership get, 6 million, Aidan was saying, to be in a mid-Premiership team.
Yeah,
do you know what, actually,
money.
Rather than the women getting paid a load more, I actually think the men should be paid a load less. I think it's absolutely abhorrent, the amount footballers get paid.
I think you should be paid what somebody's willing to pay you, unless it's publicly funded money. You should be paid what somebody's willing to pay you based on the marketplace, and if they are worth that much in this marketplace, men, then I'm okay with them getting paid that much. But I do think the women should be paid more, and I think people should start investing. If they're paid millions, that's fine. If they earn their money, I think.
I'd put a big fat NHS tax on the footballers. There you are.
Well, let us know.
That'd sort out a lot of problems.
Well, let us know what you think. GBVs at gbnews.uk. Maybe Rishi Sunak will announce that policy in a few days. He seems to be announcing every other policy. Well, the Sunday Times has reported that the Prince of Wales accepted a payment of £1 million from the family of Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, Charles allegedly accepted the money from two of Osama bin Laden's half-brothers in 2013 2 years after the al-Qaeda leader was killed. And Osama bin Laden had been long estranged from his family, who did not endorse his extremist views.
Yes, however, this is not the first time that Prince Charles or his charity have faced accusations over its donations.
Well, to give us an update on all things royal is commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, great, thanks for coming on. I mean, should we be overly concerned about Prince Charles' charity accepting this money from the bin Laden family?
Well, I mean, it was in 2013, and to place it into context, there's no question that the trustees who, I mean, it has been disputed, by the way, the Sunday Times report involved Prince Charles personally in this, but this has been very strongly denied. However, the facts are that a link with the bin Laden family, even though they had decades previously disowned Osama bin Laden, undoubtedly the name has a certain toxicity. So you could argue certainly there's nothing illegal about this, and indeed, apparently the Foreign and Commonwealth Office thought it fine, but nonetheless, I think that it would be considered unwise because, obviously, there is, as I say, this the stigma attached to name, and the facts are that this is the second some controversial donation which the Sunday Times has recently highlighted.
I read a Twitter post from our colleague here, Colin Brazier, who was a bit cynical about all of this, and he says there seems to be a lot of hit pieces against Prince Charles recently, and he thinks it's sort of a cynical attempt to discredit him because, of course, we know he will be the future king very soon. Do you think there's any truth to that?
No doubt that the Sunday Times and earlier at the Time been running articles that certainly have been somewhat embarrassing and certainly detrimental. But there's no question also he spent a tremendously long time as Prince of Wales, as we all know. The more jobs he's taking over, such as the opening of Parliament or COP22 or Chogham from the Queen, the nearer, so to speak, he moves to the throne, the more those who feel that there are inadequacies in his performance will highlight them. There's no question that as someone whose charitable endeavours over the years has been absolutely extraordinary, we have to surely highlight that too and mention his trust has helped over 1 million young disadvantaged people, and also there's some nearly 20 charities he's withdrawn now from the day-to-day running of these done by trustees. The facts are, however, that the way, for example, some of this has been handled, the fact that large amounts of cash between 2011 and 2015 by the Tory former Prime Minister were handed reportedly. This, again, it's very unorthodox. This is being highlighted obviously for the purpose, and that purpose is certainly not favourable to the Prince. Equally, there are aspects of this which are embarrassing.
Can't have you on without, of course, talking about the Duke and Duchess of Montecito. Recent headlines have suggested the Queen was likely to invite them personally to go and stay with her. She wants to get to know her great-grandchildren. But that visit could well be postponed until Harry's book comes out. What's the latest goss?
Well, the latest actually was embarrassing for a large number of sources that highlighted a report which said that the Queen had invited them and then had to countermand it with the fact that apparently no such invitation was issued to Balmoral. However, what I think is very significant and potentially destructive. We know now Harry's memoir is going to come out towards the end of this year. What that contains, I mean, it will affect the relation between the Sussexes and the royal family for a considerable period. As we know, there's a rift, and this potentially, I'm afraid, is pretty dangerous given the enormous number of things that could be said, and also given the difficulty of rebutting that which is, shall we say, their truth, the Sussexes' truth, which we saw a lot on Oprah, and the differences sometimes between that and the truth.
the royal family as your career, and you're talking about their truth versus the truth. Did you find, watching the Oprah interview and various other things that couple have said since moving to California, that there is a bit of a gulf between their lived experience and what actually happened?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt, for example, they didn't marry twice. That's a fact. Also, Archie, when Charles ascends to the throne, will get a title. That is a fact. Also, again, they expressed when they stepped back only to step down as were senior working members of the royal family, that they were doing so to make their own way financially. Now that was linked to security issues. Now, I mean, those are important to them. But the facts are that Oprah didn't press or push them on a single issue, and she most emphatically should have, because, again, it's impossible to rebut an interview like that. What you need is some form of healing the rift, at least to the point where both the Sussexes and the royal family have an agreement that the one will not, so to speak, adversely attack or injure the other. I mean, this did damage in America and in the Commonwealth. On the other hand, Harry and Meghan's popularity in Britain is at an all-time low currently, but I don't think that greatly concerns them. There's, of course, Harry's case against the Home Office regarding security. It's a difficult time for the royal family, but this memoir potentially could be very, very difficult for them.
Well, Richard, thank you for joining us this morning. Always good to have you on the show. Richard Fitzwilliams there, who's a royal commentator. Exasperated. It feels like every time we talk about Meghan and Harry, it's never good news. It's always they've done something embarrassing. They've done something to irritate people again. They don't really cast themselves in a good light. But then again, this book or whatever it is, this Netflix thing that will be out this autumn should be very interesting.
Yeah, no, it should be. But, you know,
I think
they
people are going to watch it,
don't they? Going like, oh, we're such family people. We've got our tiny little humble 12-bathroom mansion in California and our chickens in the garden. And, you know, it's all about family. And then, you know, there he is slagging off his family.
Another attempt at an American accent.
Family. I don't know what that was. It's a bit deranged.
Well, let's take you through some of the other lighter news of the day that you might have missed. We like to end the show on a few lighter topics, shall we say.
Nibs, as we call them.
Yeah, little nibs, knees and breeze.
Cheeky nibs.
Yes, go on, you go.
Now, a 27-year-old man claims his youthful appearance is holding him back. Oh, don't I know it. Potential employers refuse to believe he is any older than 12.
Yes, well, Mao Sheng, who, for our TV viewers, you can see him there. In my opinion, if you're listening to us, go type in Mao Sheng, because he does look about 7 years old. He's from Dongguan in China. He says he can't get a job, and employers have accused him of lying about his age, and he was left feeling quite defeated.
However, after he's gone viral, some good news. He's now been offered work, probably in the skincare industry, I'm guessing. I want to know what he's
I was going
to
say, you know, that's the best problem to have, surely, that people think. However, it's not a good problem to have if you're trying to buy alcohol from the shop and then you get ID'd everywhere.
Yeah, no.
And you don't have your ID. Do you still get ID'd?
Do you know what? Sometimes I do, and it's the highlight of my week when it happens, because I'm pushing 40.
But do you know when it's not the highlight? When you don't have your ID?
Do you know what happened to me once? I was at the supermarket and I wanted to buy a bottle of champagne to go with this really elaborate dinner I was cooking for my other half, and there was samphire in there, turbot, all sorts of gubbins. Yeah. And then they ID'd me for the champagne then. I'm like, do you really think if I was 18 I'd be buying samphire and turbot?
If you were 17, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Exactly.
They ID you for ridiculous things now, like butter knives or whatever. Sometimes you can't get very basic items without actually...
I buy champagne at the supermarket and you buy knives.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Butter knives, to be precise. More good news. Two conjoined twins who shared fused brains have successfully been separated.
Yeah, Bernardo and Arthur Lima underwent several surgeries in Rio in Brazil. The 3-year-old boys had a total of 7 operations involving more than 33 hours of operating time, with almost 100 medical staff involved.
Yes, well, the two boys are also the oldest craniopagus twins. I think that's conjoined twins, but in Latin to be posh, with a fused brain to have been separated. they're both recovering well, and it's actually extraordinary because when you see the pictures, they, conjoined twins. I don't even know how to describe it. It's unbelievable when you see pictures like that
because all the microsurgery, the veins, the arteries.
So the fact doctors can actually do that is extraordinary. It just goes to show how incredible medical staff can be. But that is it from us here at To The Point. But don't go away, because up next is the briefing, this time with Alistair Stewart. You won't want to miss that. We're back tomorrow, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Hello again, Aidan McGivern here with the latest from the Met Office. Dry for many today with some warm sunshine, but there will be rain in the north later and across some central areas as well. At the moment, an area of high pressure, elongated, is stretching out towards the UK, but along the top of that high, some weather fronts are coming along, and they'll send rain in from the west later. In fact, the first signs of that rain into the far west of Northern Ireland by the afternoon. And one or two showers couldn't be ruled out for parts of East Anglia and the far southeast. But for many, it will stay dry here, rather cloudy here. Plenty of sunshine in between these areas of weather and feeling warm. 23 to 25 for parts of England and Wales, low 20s for Scotland, 28 for London, and then for Northern Ireland, feeling cooler as a breeze and rain sweeps in by the end of the afternoon. That pushes into Scotland, Northern England, parts of North and West Wales overnight. Some heavy bursts over the hills of Western England, Western Scotland, North West Wales as well. And with that cloud and rain arriving, it's a fairly muggy night. Temperatures staying up in the mid to high teens. But it stays dry in the far south and southeast once again. A lot of cloud to start the day and further bursts of rain